right now. We are live.
We are live.
We are
Awesome.
live.
Hey, everyone. I think we might wait a minute or so before we get started, but we'll just chit chat among ourselves.
Yeah, if anyone wants to put into there you go. If anyone wants to put into the YouTube comments where they're from, that might be exciting. We can see where the furthest away person is connecting from.
Yeah, drop a hello. Tell us where you're from. Yeah. I'm in the UK, despite my accent.
I'm in the UK because of my accent.
I'm in France, and my accent has nothing with it.
Cool. No one said,
okay. Oh, are people being shy? We should try a different thing and perhaps, UK. Oh, yeah,
that was me.
Like somebody answered. People are sometimes a little shy about comments.
More New York. Big Apple.
I was in New York once for 3 days. I saw nothing. It was very quick. I kind of regret that.
Oh, I love New York.
Vancouver, Canada,
Argentina.
There you go.
I haven't been to Argentina yet. I'd love to go.
Oh, delicious food.
Hey,
Pradeep. Hey,
Pradeep. Get you on Twitter. Hello.
Hey, friends. Awesome. Thank you guys for responding. If more people jump through or jump in, Munich. Hey, Bernard is here. I love Bern. Awesome. I guess we'll just get started. If you're wondering why people are writing their location, is because we totally want to know where you're from. Remote everything. Let's see how far our reach goes. But awesome to have everyone here today. Thank you for joining us in our first ever event for the Product Dynamic. My name is Andrea. I'm one of the co-founders here, as well as Jason over there. I don't know where I'm pointing at. So confusing. A quick little intro about the Product Dynamic. Basically, our aim is to focus on helping teams build awesome teams, which in turn helps you build even better products. We're going to be exploring topics like UX psychology, breaking cognitive biases, diversity and inclusion, and neurodiversity support at work. Our first ever speaker today here with us is Kate Leto. Thank you so much, Kate, for joining us today. Super exciting to have you here to join us, in our first event.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm honored to be your inaugural guest.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Start on a high.
Yeah,
cool. So
it's all downhill from
before we let Kate get started, just a couple of things for everyone. This is being streamed and recorded live to YouTube. So if you have to jump off, don't worry about it. You can also watch it back whenever you're ready on this same URL. We're also going to have a Q&A at the end with Kate. So at any point, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. And in the Q&A section, Jason is going to flash them on screen for Kate to be able to answer. And of course, if you like it, send this to your friends, send this to your coworkers, send this to your mom. Why not? With that said, Kate, go ahead.
Cool. Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm sure my mom will be watching sooner or later. So everyone should. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. You guys all might see a very messy screen for a minute, but we'll see how this goes. Oops. I'm just sharing me.
I can share it once you've unmessed it, if you like.
Once I've okay. Cool. Actually, no, it's all right. I think I've got a direct. Let's see how hold on. Keynote. So let's try this. Do I share now?
Yeah, if you click the share button down the bottom, I can add you to the stage.
Cool.
There we go. Good luck.
Thanks. Hey, how about that? Not too bad. Hello, everyone. I'm Kate. I'm very happy to be here with all of you tonight. I'm going to be talking about hiring product managers using product EQ to go beyond culture and skills. And it just so happens the name of the talk is the same as the name of a book that I published through Sense and Respond Press a few months ago. That's gotten some great reviews from Marty Kagan and Martin Erickson from Mind the Product and others. So this talk will give you a little bit of the context of that from what's in the book, but it's going to focus particularly around some general themes in hiring that I think our product and our product organizations, as we're going through change and transformation, are stumbling upon. So just for a little bit of context before we get going, I'm an independent product consultant and org design consultant as well. And I've been in product for well over 20 years now, which is scary but true. And over the last 10 years, I have been an independent consultant. And I've had a chance to work with organizations of all shapes and sizes all over the world that have one thing in common, and that is that they're going through some kind of change. That could be something big, like they want to create an entire new product practice in their organization where there just wasn't one before and they're starting from scratch. It could be something more on a smaller size where they want to change how their teams are thinking or working together, how they're making decisions, how they're hiring. But no matter what, there's just this common element of change involved. And I've noticed in working with organizations that are going through change, their knee-jerk reaction is to think of hiring. If we want to change how our structure, we want to change how we're thinking of building or supporting or developing our products, we want a new kind of expertise involved, let's go hire. So I've been involved in a lot of hiring over the last decade or so. And the book itself kind of brings together the accumulation of my experiences. And I tell a fictitious story about a fictitious client that, of course, is based on some very real clients that I've had throughout the years. And this client in the book is called New Star Bank. And that New Star Bank, they are going through a massive product transformation in which they're trying to create a product practice from scratch. And they do start doing that by hiring. They have when I first meet them in the book, they have some pretty aggressive hiring goals. And the first hire, of course, is to bring in a new director of product. And in the book, you'll then meet Pete, who is the New Star director of product. And he was brought on because pretty much Pete was a very referenced and credible, safe pair of hands. He worked at a competitor, starting as a junior associate in product management, working up to head of before he moved over to New Star. He knew a lot of the people at New Star, a lot of members of the management team. He went to the same school as a few of them did. There was a lot of consistency and alignment, and really what was expected to be a strong culture fit with Pete and New Star. So he was hired by Sarah, and the leadership team, and they were really excited to have Pete come in as their first new product hire, and especially part of a new product leadership view and perspective that they were going to be bringing in. But as you can imagine, things didn't go as planned. And as the tale goes on within the book, about 6 months in, we find that members of the product organization that Pete is managing are planning to leave, and Pete has not been able to achieve any of his goals that he and the leadership team agreed to when he first joined. And within the book, you can find out the whys and wheres and all the facts and the story behind it. But really, the challenges that Pete was facing and that New Star was facing came down to two common pitfalls that I see a lot of product organizations stumble on. And the first is that when they think of hiring, they think of hiring for what I call technical skills, for what work that person, that role is going to be doing. And in product management, that varies quite a bit because we do so many different things. But some of the mainstays are building roadmaps, putting together vision statements, especially if you're on a leadership level. The vision and the strategy and the mission all coming together are very important. Building out OKRs and KPIs, product prototypes, testing with customers, multivariate testing, MVPs. All these things are what we do as product management, and they're just a small sample of them. And this, I would say, probably 8 out of 10 times when thinking about hiring, this is what we focus on in terms of the candidate that we're looking for and the candidate that we think we want. And that's much to the dismay of what I call human skills, which is how the work is done. So we don't think about when we're hiring, when we're kind of envisioning a new role to join our organization, things like what's their leadership skill and capability like? How about their adaptability, their ability to influence up into the upper echelons of management, but also to influence members of their team and members of their own organization. How do they deal with conflict? Because we always know there's going to be some kind of level of conflict and tension within the work that we do. How high is their EQ, which is the measurement of their emotional intelligence, which relates back to skills and capabilities like self-awareness and self-management, social awareness and relationship management. And the work that I do and the writing that I do in the book and the blogs and the talks that I give, I really try to focus on helping product organizations build a balanced product practice that's based on an equilibrium of technical skills and human skills. And that is often not what we start out with, right? We often start out with an over indexing and focus on the technical skills, much to the detriment of the human skill side. And that's what we often see in our hiring. And Pete, within my book and within the story, is a perfect example of that. Pete was hired for what he would do. He was always somebody that would deliver his products on time, on budget, on scope, but they didn't think about how he would do the work. And that had a big impact on his inability to meet goals. So the second area that Newstar and Pete stumbled when it came to thinking about hiring was that they really focused on culture fit. Pete was like a no-brainer culture fit, right? He went to the same school that a few members of the leadership team went to. They had friends in common. He was actually referred to the position by a friend of a friend. So there was just a lot of commonality and alignment when it came to things like personal goals, values, kind of the norms that make up a culture. And that's not a bad thing. You know, there's a lot of research out there that says when you do have good alignment in those areas between an organization and the person and the individual, you do get this great kind of click, this cultural fit that can mean that there's reduced levels of turnover and it can lead to improvements and increased performance. So that's a good thing. However, we can once again kind of over-index on culture fit and not realize and not remember that a key part of product management and our teams and having really high performance teams is diversity in our thinking, right? We need to have the ability and to have the people within a team, within our organization, that are not always going to think exactly alike. We need to have some divergence in our thinking. We need to have room for debates because that helps us think more about the decisions we're making. It challenges more. It helps us become more curious and pushes our innovation levels. And that really is the competitive difference, I'd say, and how our products are going to perform in the marketplace. It's a huge opportunity for us to actually move from thinking about culture fit to something called culture complements. Culture complements is a concept that I found over the last few years as I've been working more with transformation and cultural transformations, that originally I found in an article written by the former VP of Employee Experience at Adobe, who said when he was looking at a team, he'd look at a team and ask, is it a stack or is it a puzzle? Because a stack is more of the same, right? Same. Pete was same as every other member of the leadership team, right? But puzzle pieces are different. So we want to look for the pieces that actually complement each other to form a whole. We don't want to find that kind of same stack. So that's the other area that I see a lot of organizations, and I talk about Newstar stumbling as well in the book, is over-index on culture fit, much to the detriment of complements that can help us actually realize what we're missing in our culture now and hire to help us build a better culture in the future. So I want to talk about next 3 different things that you can do within your organization to help move from these over-indexing and hiring and focus technical skills and focusing more on human skills, and from the over-index of hiring on culture fit and thinking more about culture complements. So the first one is actually building a role that matters. So I don't know about you guys, but when I was kind of a young hustling head of product and I'd get new headcount. I remember it was always so exciting. It was like Christmas came early, right? Because I could hire somebody to do a lot of the things that I wasn't as interested in anymore, and I could grow and move on. And I'd go back to my desk and I'd write up. Actually, I wouldn't always start by writing up a job description. I'd go online and I'd look at like how Amazon product management job descriptions were formed and what they were saying, or Google, or some of the other kind of industry leaders. And you'd always see something like this: must-haves and nice-to-haves. And I'd start out by just copying and pasting. And that would usually get me to kind of a first draft. And it's interesting, when I was doing research for the book, I found a study that said, while 80% of hiring managers say that job descriptions and writing job descriptions are super important, 50% of us actually just cut and paste them. So I wasn't alone in that kind of relying on other job descriptions to help me get to my own. But anyway, I would end up with something like this that had must-haves at the top, nice-haves at the bottom, and must-haves, when you think about it and you break it down, are pretty much our technical skills, right? They're really what work will this role be doing. Nice to haves are the human skills, and it's how to approach the work. So this is an example of a job description that I've found. So this is real, and I'm not going to name names and where it came from, because it's a great learning opportunity for all of us to take a look at. But this is, very typical job description for an e-commerce product manager, where under must-haves, we have things like you've got to have proven work experience in your B2C product management in a specific area, a proven track record of managing all aspects of a successful product through life cycle, proven ability to develop marketing and product strategies and effectively communicate them and basically influence senior management. It'd be great if you had a solid technical background as well. And whenever I read those 4 bullets, my stomach always gets a little tight, because I can't imagine being an e-commerce product manager. So probably, maybe mid-level, and seeing this job description and feeling like I have to be able to prove myself in every way before I really apply for this job. The first time I saw this, makes you realize how important the words are that we use in our job descriptions and what kind of message it can give to somebody who might be interested in applying. Because in this one, I would think this organization maybe isn't going to give me an opportunity to learn and grow, but instead is the kind of organization where I've got to prove myself before I can even get in there for interview. I've got to prove myself day in and day out in what I'm doing. So that's must-haves. If we move on to nice-to-haves in this job description, again, this is for an e-commerce product manager. They want somebody who's comfortable with ambiguity. And I swear, probably about 7 out of 10 product management job descriptions start with that line. We want someone comfortable with ambiguity, somebody who remains unfazed when you're doing things you've never done before. And then it goes on to say, we'd like you to be a natural-born leader, which it does always make me giggle, because I don't know about you guys, but I don't know a lot of people that just kind of come out of the womb ready to lead. There's no training, there's no coaching, there's no reading books, there's nothing like that. You're just ready to go. And at an e-commerce product management level as well, you're just ready to go. And then it goes on to say, we'd like you to be anti-fragile. So the more I read job descriptions like this, I feel like what organizations, and similar to what Newstar did in the book and the way that case study is set up, is that they're just looking for something that doesn't exist. They've cut and pasted from other job descriptions. They haven't really considered what the actual role is. Instead, they've kind of set themselves up for a way that they're looking for a unicorn. They're looking for somebody that isn't real. So instead of going down this route and cutting and pasting and focusing on must-haves and nice-to-haves and creating something that is probably far outside of anyone's real capacity and skills at that level, the role canvas is something that I use with clients. And it's based on 4 really simple questions. The purpose, why does the role exist? So this isn't just the job title. This is going a level deeper. What is this role going to be doing day in and day out to achieve its purpose? Why is it really there? What's its reason for being? Then the accountabilities. What are the goals and the outcomes that it's going to be working towards to achieve its purpose? And then breaking those down into human skills and technical skills. Because again, what we're trying to achieve is alleviating this over-indexing on technical skills, on things like roadmap, design sprints, product vision, all of that stuff, which is essential, but it's not the whole enchilada, right? We need to focus on human skills. So what really will this role need? What kind of capabilities? Leadership, conflict resolution, influence, adaptability. What is really essential? Self-awareness, emotional self-management. All these things are really key to product management. And thinking about them in terms of a new role can help us actually learn more about them. I remember one of the first times I used this with a client, they just wrote down in human skills box, emotional intelligence. And we get to a point where that's just not good enough, because we need to push ourselves to actually learn what is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is made up of 4 key capabilities or competencies: self-awareness, emotional self-control, social awareness, and relationship management. So by using something like a role canvas, you're not only putting together a more comprehensive and meaningful role for a new candidate, you're also learning about the different elements of human skills at the same time. And while the role canvas is something you can do on your own, you could go back to your laptop at home on the couch and put this together for a new candidate and for a new role. It's best done in a workshop setting, even a virtual workshop setting, with other members of your team, even your manager or a recruiter, if there's a recruiter involved, because doing this together can help you get alignment on what this role really is before you start interviewing. Because a lot of times I see someone will write a job description that's focusing on our technical skills, and everyone will start interviewing for that. But they have different thoughts and different ideas on what that role should really be about, what that person's really going to be accountable for. So using this as a team alignment tool can bring a whole different perspective to how you think about your hiring and how you think about what this role will be. And if you'd like to use it and try it with your team in your own virtual workshop, you can go to my website. It's my name, kateleto.com, and download a copy of this for yourself and your team. So that's the first thing that you can do to start to think about how you can change your hiring, and focusing more on human skills and focusing more on understanding what you might be missing in your team and in your organization to actually bring in some culture complements versus just culture fit. The second thing is that you can prepare some meaningful questions. So again, when I go back and think about when I was doing hiring as a head of product, a lot of times, like 5 minutes before an interview, I would go to Google and do a search for brain teaser questions, right? And I'd get something like this: which do you think has more advertising potential in Boston, a flower shop or a funeral home? Or a design and evacuation plan for the building. These questions have absolutely nothing to do with the job that this person or the role that you've designed, most likely, except maybe they'll hit on that first very popular bullet point in the nice to haves. How does this person deal with ambiguity? Otherwise, their sole purpose, I think, in looking back, is to make the interviewer feel pretty clever and just see the candidate, the person who's dedicated time to come in and talk to you virtually or physically, make them squirm a bit. It doesn't really tell you, will they be able to fulfill that role that you've now designed. So instead of doing brain teaser questions, I encourage people to start thinking about behavioral interview questions. So behavioral interview questions are very simple, right? They're not meant to trick, but they're meant to reveal. And there are behavioral interview questions that you can use to help understand different human skills and help to get something like conflict resolution, that could be something that your team is looking to hire for, to help make something as intangible as conflict resolution more tangible. So an example of a behavioral interview question for conflict resolution is, tell me about a time when you suggested something that someone disagreed with, right? What did you say? How did you handle the situation? Again, very simple, not meant to throw anybody off, but meant to help you understand how someone has behaved in the past in a work experience, and that will help you understand how they may behave going forward. The one thing we need to be careful with, though, with behavioral interview questions is that there isn't always that direct link between how someone's behaved in the past and how they will behave in the future, because we're humans. We can change. We can develop our own human skills, right? It takes time and it takes effort and it takes commitment, but it's possible. But through these questions, you can get a better understanding of what has happened in the past and how that person might handle themselves going forward if it's in a different way. Another example of a conflict resolution question could be, have you ever encountered someone at work who is unreasonable? What did you say? I don't know about you guys, but like this happens all the time. So these are very common scenarios that in an interview you can actually use to learn more about the person, and if they do have those human skills that are really essential for the role that you're looking for. The interesting thing with behavioral interview questions is that the onus and making the most out of them is really on you, the interviewer, right? Because you need to be able to listen to the story that the candidate is telling you. And you need to be able to nudge, and you need to be able to probe until you can actually make that skill, like conflict resolution, that does seem really intangible, make it real. So for example, if your team, let's say your team has had a lot of conflict lately, so the new role that you bring in, you'd like that person to be able to handle conflict in a really positive manner. So in the story the question that you're asking, the response that you're receiving, ask questions to help you make sense of how does this person deal with conflict? Do they engage with it or do they walk away? If they do engage, how do they engage? Do they want everybody to feel like a winner, or do they want a winner and a loser scenario? And then take that information back and think about it in comparison or in alignment with your role and the organization that you're trying to build for the future, and have a good kind of moment of self-reflection to see if there is alignment there, if this person can actually fit, or can actually become that new missing piece of the puzzle. There's this great book that I found when I was writing my book, and it's called The EQ Interview. So if you're interested in learning much more about behavioral interview questions, and you'd like to actually find specific questions relating to things like leadership or teamwork or self-awareness or empathy, conflict resolution, I really encourage you to pick up this book by Adele Lin. She's got some amazing questions and a lot of information to help you put them into context and use them very well. So the third thing that you could do to actually think about, or to actually move from your place of being overly focused on technical skills to human skills, and again, moving from culture fit to culture complement, is to reflect and respond. And let me explain this a little bit, because when I start working with organizations, a lot of times I ask them to draw out for me their typical product hiring process. And it's something like this, right? It's very linear. We start with the job description and we end with the offer. And I don't know about you guys, but as a product person, I can't remember the last time I actually worked within a linear process, right? And building our products. We all know that everything is cyclical. Everything goes round and round. Everything is an opportunity for us to learn. Everything has this great capacity to bring in new elements of continuous learning into our processes and into our approach for building new products. So I think there is a great way to bring continuous learning and that idea of retrospection into our hiring processes. And I think that can make our hiring processes even better. In the book, I talk about something called calibration meetings, which is very much like retros, right? We have having retros as you go through the hiring process with your team. And it's not just how are we doing in hiring, but it's taking a look at and comparing and sharing the answers that you're getting back from your from your behavioral interview questions. It's looking back and mapping back the information you're finding to the role that you had originally designed, and actually creating some space to change that role if need be, if you're finding things aren't quite aligning the way you thought, or maybe if there's change within your organization. It's just giving yourselves time to change and learn and move as you're hiring, the same as we do when we're building products. One of the things in particular I talk about in the book is a role retro. And that's once you do hire someone, the learning doesn't even stop there. Probably I recommend 6 or 9 months down the line, putting an appointment, an event in your calendar to actually look back at the role itself. So it's bringing together everybody who is involved in the hiring, including the person that you hired, and sitting down, looking at that role you designed, looking at the role that you thought you wanted to hire for, and asking, did you get it right? Now, this isn't asking if the person is doing a good job in their job. That's a different personal development conversation that you should be having as you're working together. This is very much, did we get the role right? Is this the actual purpose that the person is working towards? Are the accountabilities and the goals right? Are their OKRs what we thought they might be, or at least close to it? Did we hire for the right skills that are actually needed in the role now? So it's an opportunity to continue to learn and evaluate the role that you created a few months after that person has come into the organization. The inspiration for the role retro actually comes from Jack Welch, who was CEO at GE, of course, and who was very passionate on making sure that his teams had made good hiring decisions. So he would do something like this. He would actually ask people before the hire was made if they thought it was a good hire or not, and he'd bring them all back together a year later to see how they did, to see if this was a good hiring decision or not. And he created a metric out of it, actually, called the hiring batting average. So those of you in New York that are familiar with the batting average from baseball, you're kind of familiar with this. But it's something that we can, it's the idea of having a metric, that's something that holds us to accountability for making good decisions. That's based on, based on a meaningful role that includes, hiring people and interviewing people for their human skills and not just their technical skills, and building a culture that complements versus replicates. So at the end of the book, we talk about a skills learning loop. So it's kind of, again, reinforcing this idea that instead of thinking of hiring as just this linear process, that through these 3 simple steps, you're actually building a new product practice and a new way of hiring that's going to evolve and iterate as you go. So you're going to be basing it on building a role that matters. You're going to be checking for those human skills, especially that you identify in your role canvas in your interview with behavior-based interviews. And you're going to be reflecting or responding along the way. You're going to realize this isn't a linear process, and that there's opportunities to learn and grow during the process and at the end as well. It continues. It makes us redefine that idea of done within hiring. But the most important thing really is, if you do want to hire for human skills, if you do want to build teams that are based on culture complements, not just culture fit, the secret, it really comes down to you. Because if you're going to hire for these skills, if you're going to hire for differences, you need to be able to see them yourselves. So it's a lot of work to build our human skills. But if you want to hire for conflict resolution, you need to have it yourself. And you can. It's possible to build human skills through working with coaches and through many other practices that I talk about in a lot of articles on my blog. It's hard, it's a challenge, and it takes much more time than learning technical skills, but it is completely feasible. And that's what I like to help organizations and individuals and teams do. So if there's any way I can help, if you'd like to talk about it, we'll have a Q&A now. That's my nudge, Jason, that I'm ready for the Q&A. But otherwise, please keep in touch through my website, through Twitter, and beyond.
Thank you very much for the for the run through. It's very timely for me because I think I might be hiring soon as well. So that would be very exciting. We do have a couple of questions, so I'll go through those now. And I think, well, the first question wasn't really a question, but it was an interesting stat, which I'd like to get your take on. I think if I click that. So Bernhard says that women typically apply for jobs when they see at least a 90% fit with the must-have requirements, whereas men apply if they have a 65% match.
Right. Yeah.
You said a massive amount about the overconfidence of mediocre men, but how do you think that the pattern of really kind of dumb job specs can, I mean, do you think that can have a really big impact on the diversity of teams?
Yeah, I do, because when we copy and paste or we don't think about our job specs, we often use words that will appeal to men and turn off women. And there's a lot of research behind that. So I'm trying to think of examples. So one of them was competitive. If a job spec says the word competitive, that's going to turn off a lot of women. So there are like specific ones. I'll have to look up others because that would be a really interesting blog to write about, actually. Some of the words that are that are more appealing to men, because it's more of it comes across as more of an aggressive workplace versus a place where you can learn and grow and kind of be your best self in the organization. So yeah, I do think by the copying and pasting, we're just kind of replicating the same thing over and over. And it often does mean that we're using words and we're using phrases that will appeal to one gender over another. And sometimes it's interesting because sometimes that's picked up in software, that looks at, if there's an organization that has lots of CVs coming in, they won't have a human looking at it. They'll have a piece of software. So often that software is also run by men who will identify words and terms in a CV that appeal to them. And again, some of them are often more aggressive tones, and that will get picked up as kind of somebody we want to talk to by the software, versus women that might have a more balanced or kind of nuanced wording to their CV. So I think it hits on both sides. It's the job description, and it can also come up in our CVs in the way that we're writing them. Words are really important.
Yeah,
context matters, right?
Context. Exactly. Yeah, this is why CVs just kind of boggle my mind a lot of times, because how can you really get across who you are and your experience in a one-pager or even more? And I think the same goes for the job description. That's why I try to help at least break it down into some different context and make kind of an equal balance of importance between our human skills and technical skills, and really focusing on what's the purpose of the job. Instead of, most of the time you just see the name of the job title and here's what we need you to do, or the experience you must have. So please just send us a CV that says you've done that. And
I'm a massive, whatever the opposite of an advocate is for things like the applicant tracking systems. I think that we've seen so many examples in the press, and the high profile one with Google like flagging people incorrectly as gorillas and stuff, and they still haven't even fixed that. Like their AI, they haven't fixed that. What they've done is they've just stopped you being able to search for gorillas because they haven't been able to fix it yet. So it's like any AI system, or quote unquote AI, that claims to be able to do half of your hiring screening for you just seems like a horrifying situation, and I think they should all be put into the bin. There's actually an interesting site that I'll put into the chat now, which I saw today, which is called a gender decoder, which basically claims to be able to flag effectively overly female or overly male words to give you an idea of like which direction. I don't know how scientifically valid it is, but it's certainly an interesting idea. So that was that one. Yeah. Then there's a bunch of others out there as well, but it's definitely an interesting concept to try and remove some of that bias that you may not even be aware of, because, like for example, if you are a guy and you are doing this, you may not even think that those words are a problem, right? Or even think twice.
Yeah, that's our cognitive bias, right? We don't even realize, and I would say a lot of times that's even, comes down to our recruiters and our HR folks may not be aware that using these words is, creating some kind of bias.
Exactly.
So
I have a question here. I love your ideas for transitioning hiring mindset, but how do you typically position this to executive leadership if they're the we should hire like FANG companies do mindset? Now, obviously, that's a whole different kettle of fish with the FANG companies in a number of ways, but what do you think about that?
How do you typically position? Well, so it is interesting because a lot of times it depends on your organization. We had a little chat before everyone joined us, and Andrea said, I'm going to give the typical product manager response to it depends. But hopefully the leadership themselves are going through some changes. And they're a bit more progressive in what they think needs to be, what they think as essential skills as well. If not, it takes some time, like I said, learning these, adapting new human skills can be done, but you have to want to do it, right? And you have to be ready to take on the challenge and do the work to do it. It is feasible. It is possible. Sometimes the best thing to do is to hire a consultant who can come in and explain the difference, because a lot of times leaders, no matter what kind of organizations, are going to listen to people from the outside versus listening to the people from the inside. And I know that's frustrating and it makes no sense, but it does happen. And I think there's also a lot of research out there these days that talks about the competitive difference, the competitive advantage you can get from having organizations, especially product organizations, that are built with people who have higher levels of self-awareness, who have higher levels of empathy, and how that can directly relate to better return on investment, better performance in their products and in their organization. If you go to my website, there's a blog about self-awareness that I wrote a few years ago. And in it, I quote a lot of research that shows how organizations whose leaders have higher levels of self-awareness outperform those in terms of return on investment, then outperform those organizations that have leadership and lower levels of self-awareness. So there's data out there. It's a bit of a campaign that you have to go on if you're working with some real legacy leadership. But there's data and research and experience to help you along with that.
Yeah, and obviously also there's a lot of connotations with some of the FANG companies, like only hiring the people from the same universities and the people that are exactly like them. So I'm assuming
I was about to say that too.
I'm very sorry. This is just me being a mediocre man talking over you again, Andrew. That's the problem.
No, that's okay. We were vibing on the exact same thought process right there, where, certain FANG companies require you to be from certain universities or have, certain connections or whatever. And that just adds to lack of diversity. Absolutely. I don't want to say it was Facebook, but it could have been Facebook. Somebody leaked one of the hiring process for early Facebook, I want to say. And I think you know what I'm talking about. And it had these very specific universities and locations that you absolutely had to come from.
Yeah.
I think it was all Ivy League schools.
It was, yeah. I read a similar article when I was working on the book. Google had something quite similar because, their founders went to Ivy League schools, two guys really focused on, advanced computer science and technology and all of this stuff. So their early hiring algorithms actually were skewed towards replicating them, hiring people just like them. And then a few years later, after they were well established and up and running and they could do this, they actually did a study. I think it was called Project Oxygen. Don't quote me, but I think it was. And in that they actually looked at what leaders within Google, what skills did they actually need to do their job? And those type of technical skills were at the very bottom. And the human skills that we're talking about in terms of, ensuring psychological safety within a group, having self-awareness, collaboration, leadership, all of that was what they really needed to be looking for. So they made a big change to that algorithm. I don't know if it's paid off yet or not. But it was interesting to see, you know, the direct connotation between these are our founders and we want people just like them. So let's skew higher for them.
Yeah, I think one interesting thing, I remember having an interesting conversation when I interviewed Marty Kagan, which was all around, like, he's almost, and he admits it himself, like the archetypal privileged middle-aged white guy that's come from a certain college and learned certain things, and obviously then worked for certain companies. And the one thing that I liked about what he said was that whilst he is that and he acknowledges that, at the same time he can try to use that privilege to then inform others and try to promote the diversity for the people that are following. So I think that's an important thing to do. It's the people that are at a position where they're at, you know, they've gone into senior leadership. They're not going to not do that anymore because that's the position. But if they can use their power and privilege to open the doors for the people that follow, I think that can be an incredibly powerful thing as well. Yeah,
I'm going to put in. Can I add a comment here?
You should be able to put into the comment, yeah.
I can do private chat. I have a link to the article that I read about this, and I just want to put that. I'm going to put it in private. I think
if you put it in the private chat, then Jason can.
Yeah, I can paste it across as well.
Push it off. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's with Washington Post. You're going to have to agree to their terms and conditions to read it. But, you know, just to clean your cookies afterwards.
So we have a question from Andrew. How can an interviewee utilize these tactics to ensure reverse culture competencies are met? 100% sure.
Yeah, could you tell us more about reverse culture competencies?
Is that like making sure that the companies meet your criteria, or maybe Angie could put something else in the chat about that? But while we're doing that, we'll speak to the next question from Michelle. Can you speak to the relationship of anti-bias and D&I efforts to battle a culture stack within a company to achieving more of a culture complement?
Can I speak to the relationship of it? Well, what is there anything in particular? So definitely organizations that are focused more on diversity and inclusion and trying to kind of educate people within the organization about cognitive bias, these are really good things, right? And within that, by doing that, we can help try to actually create teams and organization that is based around divergence in thinking versus same, and creating that culture stack. So is there anything in particular, a question that you have on how to do that or the relationship to it? Could you give us a bit more context about what you'd like to talk about? There is a relationship, though, definitely. Organizations that are trying to do this, and Jason and Andrea, you probably have good examples of this as well. Organizations that are trying to do this, it can help break that culture stack and look at things more as that missing piece of the puzzle and culture complement.
Yeah, one thing on that, actually, while we're waiting for hopefully some additional info on that, is I'm quite keen on the idea of anonymized CVs to help try and break that as well. So obviously, there's always going to be a point where you have to look the person face to face at some point, you know, virtual or otherwise. But to kind of break that initial cycle by saying, look, I don't care which school you come from. I don't care which country you come from, which language you speak, you know, anything like that. What I want to know is the fundamental skills that we've hopefully all lined up via a role canvas as per your presentation. We know what we want. We're mapping the skills unemotionally, unbiased to that. Have you ever tried that in your hiring practices in the past, or have you ever heard of any success stories?
I haven't tried that. I think it'd be a really interesting experiment, but I haven't tried that. Have you guys tried it yet?
I've always bumped into personally the kind of technical limitations of the platforms that we use for hiring. So like, you know, using Greenhouse or something like that, and maybe we didn't have the module to do that or whatever. Now, obviously, you could get someone to go and scribble out the names and stuff, but, you know, never quite got there either. But yeah, I think there's a lot of studies that say that, you know, if you submit the exact same resume with like effectively a black sounding name and a white sounding name, that the black sounding name gets fewer interviews because well, there's only one implication there, right? So,
right.
like, for me, I don't necessarily think that, ultimately, if someone's massively racist, they're probably not going to hire a black person when they see them, but at least to get over the sort of implicit bias that everyone has some implicit bias, right? Like just naturally subconscious as part of their makeup.
Yeah.
And a properly civilized person will do their best to override that, system 1, system 2 and all that stuff. But having some way of effectively removing as much of that bias for as long as possible feels like a really valuable way to make the hiring process more equitable, certainly from my perspective.
Andrew, it would be.
Sorry,
go ahead. I was just going to say, it would be really interesting to do that and to try it out. But yeah, you'd have to start at the very beginning of the process, even, I guess, like how do you get the CVs or the resumes in? And by email, are they emails blocked, at the beginning and then throughout the process? But you could maybe try it manually, first and see if there's a way around it. I think that would be a fascinating experiment.
Mm-hmm. So Andrew's come back with some additional context, and I think he's obviously really paying me a compliment by hitting the nail on the head. Even an erroneous hammer can hit the nail from time to time. But the basic point, I think, is how can candidates screen companies to make sure that companies are the right culture fit for them?
Yeah, I think it's asking some honest questions in the interview, asking things like, what don't I know? What haven't I asked about? Tell me more about your workday. How does a project get approved? You can even get to that level of detail to help you understand maybe where there might be blockers in their system, be it culturally or personally, or what they might be. So yeah, I think it's coming back with some good questions around, what is the culture they're trying to build? What are their values? So while we talk about kind of culture fit and culture complement as somewhat two different things, trying to get to, a similar kind of feeling good about where you're working, a lot of it comes back to they're all based on common values within an organization. So no matter what, I think understanding what the values of the organization really are and how they live them, if they live them, would be an interesting thing to get into. Because a lot of organizations will say that innovation is a value. Well, how do they live that? Especially if that's something important to you, how do they practice innovation? How do they get better at it? So asking some specific examples that relates to how they're describing their own culture and their own way of working, and getting into just some detail there, I think would be good ways of kind of needling in.
Yeah, I think one thing I've heard from a product manager I was speaking to, she was talking about how, very much as you just said, Kate, but like there's always this pussyfooting around sometime when it comes to like not wanting to offend the interviewer or try and like scupper your chances of getting a job, but actually on the other hand you probably don't want the job if that's what they have. You're just delaying the inevitable,
right? Yeah it is interesting. Another piece of research I found said one of the most popular reason that people leave jobs for whatever reason isn't because they don't have the technical skills to do the job. It's because there's something else that's missing in there,
I can confirm that.
Yeah, exactly. So, this is what it all comes back to. We're not asking people to leave, or we're not deciding to leave because you don't have the technical skills. It's not that you can't put together a product roadmap. It's that there's something else missing there. Maybe it's the way you're being given feedback. Maybe it's the way you're being managed. Maybe it's the way you're managing others. It's these human skills that make a huge difference. So it's trying to understand how the organization, from an interview perspective, which can be so frustrating. It's like going on a date, right? You never know really what's real and what's not in those early days. But trying to actually make that untangible tangible, if values are innovation's important, make it real to me. Explain to me how you actually do it and how you live it. If building a strong leader is important for you, becoming a strong leader is important for you, how can the organization actually help you do that? So don't be afraid to ask a lot of detailed questions, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to add to that, I've just finished an interview process and started a new job. And what I really appreciated is I was really clear about the fact that I wanted a lot of transparency, not just in the interview process, but obviously in the organization because of, my previous trauma with the previous role I was at, where there was zero transparency and all these microaggressions and all these things that I very early said, this is not the role for me. This is not what I was sold on, so to speak. As you said, sometimes you're sold on the wrong perspective or the wrong culture and the wrong company. But what I really appreciated is not only did they allow me to speak to various team members and go through that process of, you don't just speak to the interviewer who may be quote unquote, embellishing certain things in order to hire you, but they also asked me for references. And this was the first time where somebody said, can we speak to someone you've previously worked with so that we can also understand, from somebody else's point of view, how you work, how you contribute to things, how you react to things. And I thought that was really cool. And I was able to ask, a previous team member and say, hey, could you jump in a call and just, talk about your experience about working with me. So that was really great.
That is really cool. It's so interesting. Different hiring processes, different countries even. So in the States, references like that are very normal. That's kind of part of the process. In the UK, I don't see it as much part of the process. I'm not quite sure why that is in the beginning, and someone tried to explain it to me as it's a legal HR thing, which I didn't really get. But yeah, I think having personal references is a huge piece of it. To be able to have somebody else speak to, what you're good at, maybe what you're not so good at, and to help, because really the goal here is not to trick somebody into taking a job and then finding out that it doesn't work. It's to actually find something that works, for everyone, and is going to help everybody achieve their own goals. Now, on that note, one of the things you were saying made me think about, so, the role canvas that I shared, I initially designed it to help teams build a new role. But over the past year, as we've all been going through crazy changes and work and making some different life decisions, it's also become a tool that I work with clients on to use to help them figure out what they want their next role to be. So what is the purpose? What do they want to be doing? What do they want to be accountable for? What are the human skills that are going to be like, what do they want to bring and what do they want to see? So transparency is a great example in that. So you can try it from kind of the reverse side as well, and try to use the tool for your own kind of personal self-reflection on what do you want to be doing.
So just lastly from Michelle, the follow-up was apparently I spoke to this a bit. So again, stop clock being right once or twice a day, whatever. See, I couldn't even get that right. But what I was thinking about how making the hiring process more equitable and how this aligns with growing product teams using EQ and achieving culture complement. I mean, are there any thoughts, Kate, around that other than some of the things you've already mentioned? I guess maybe one way to answer that would be what's one thing you would advise a hiring team to do first, apart from buy your book and read it?
Yeah. I think it comes back to thinking about the role itself. And actually, throwing out that job description where a lot of teams just go to, and actually sitting down together and saying what really is the purpose of this role and what will this person be doing? Because that eliminates so much kerfuffle and tension later, when sometimes when I've sat down with groups to do this, they've realized they don't need to hire somebody else because somebody within the group is actually already doing this. So it saves you time and energy there. But I think it's just it is approaching creating a role in a much more meaningful way. Instead of just ticking the box, it's thinking about it comprehensively. the purpose and the skills that you're going to need. And a lot of it, I think by doing that, you're also going to learn much more about these human skills and maybe where you're not as strong. Maybe your self-awareness could use a little kind of pick me up or a little extra attention. Maybe your conflict resolution skills could, or your leadership. So for me, a lot of it does come back to really having meaningful, open, transparent conversations around what it is that you think you need to hire for. And go from there. Excellent.
Well, we're at time. So obviously, thanks very much, Kate, for taking the time out of your French expedition.
Yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
You're fully unpacked. Obviously, anyone who wants to follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter, I've just put the links in the chat so you can go and do that if you would like to. And if there are any questions that you'd like to ask after this, on reflection or anything, feel free to post them in one of those places. Or I assume, Kate, you'd be delighted for people to ping you on LinkedIn or Twitter as well, and continue to build your burgeoning following.
Yeah.
But absolutely. Yeah, so no, absolutely, and obviously, really grateful to everyone for turning up to the inaugural event. It's been really exciting, and we hope to have some really interesting additional events to announce in the near future. So we will, again, if you sign up to those LinkedIn or Twitter pages, or follow, or do whatever you have to do on those platforms, you'll get all the news. But as for now, from Andrew and myself, and of course Kate, I guess we thank you and wish you a fantastic evening.
Au revoir.
Oh, there you go. That's the French already. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.